Hey, welcome to the Extra Podcast. My name is Daniel Mark, and I'm joined around the table by Greg Harris, who is a usual suspect on this podcast. And we have in the studio with us a familiar face, a freshly shaved face. Some might even say a handsome face. We're joined by John Mulder.
That's right. I'm back.
He's back. And you might know John as the old host of this podcast. And he won't stop whispering in my ear to try and get back on the podcast.
Wow, Daniel. Make me sound desperate.
No. I think it's fair to say that John is very busy in mission.
Yes.
Like you're crazy. Your schedule is crazy busy.
Yep.
And Daniel is not.
It's true.
I mean, Daniel, fine. He's got things to do. But let's be honest.
He's got time to host a podcast.
He has enough time to host a podcast.
Guys, I prioritize this podcast because I love this podcast. And this podcast matters to me, Greg.
I would say that on the scale of like to love of this podcast, you are a lot closer to the love side.
Yes.
You were a long-time listener.
I am a long-time listener.
Have you listened to every episode of the Extra Podcast?
There's a period of my life where I didn't listen to it for a while.
Where you fell away?
Yeah, I fell away.
The dark years.
But I did get back on my bike.
Okay.
And I did continue the race that was run. And look where it got me, John. I'm now the host.
Yes, you are.
But
and
John, is this your first time as a contributor?
As a guest contributor on the yeah.
There you go.
I was hosting for a while, and now they've brought me back. Brought me back. They called up from the minors because
Jeff's ill.
There's some holes on the bench. So
Jeff, well, we should rephrase that, Greg. I mean, Jeff told a little fib on the weekend, which we corrected him on the last podcast, and now he is quote unquote sick. And not here.
Are you drawing a correlation between those two things?
I'm just saying. I'm just noticing patterns, Greg.
I'm pretty sure
patterns.
I'm pretty sure he repented.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, I like to just point out patterns when I see him. John, you're in mission quite a bit. Tell us, because you're with Ezra Okoti.
Yes, I am.
Who used to be quite a character on this podcast.
Yes, he was.
On this radio show. He was always around speaking on this, but now he's tied up in mission. And you're tied up in mission.
Tied up's maybe the wrong word. He's busy for the Lord in mission.
He's not actually tied up.
Yeah.
He's fully mobile.
Totally.
Yeah.
So tell us what that's like. How is Mission Campus doing? You guys moved into the new building.
We did move into the new building in June, and it's going really well.
One service, right?
One service on Sunday mornings in the new auditorium there in our ministry center, and it's going really well. We've got a lovely group of people that attend that church that it's been a privilege getting to know them over the last year and a bit since I've been over there, and ministering and partnering alongside the people that are there has been really awesome, and growing and learning, and it's a good time out there.
So, John, just so that people know, you're not just like this guy we picked up off the street who used to host this thing.
Yep.
Tell the good people a little bit about your background educationally, and you're in your second year of the pastoral internship with Immerse. Yep. But before that, what was some of the things that you did?
So before that, some of my Bible school, I went to Cape and Rain, England. That's about 8 years ago now. That feels like a long time ago. And then after Cape and Rain, I did Bible school down in Portland at Multnomah University. So I went to the States and studied there. Was part of a good local church. One of the things that I try to remind young adults of constantly is if they're leaving to go away for whatever reason, to go to school or find work, that the first thing they got to do is get plugged into a local church. I didn't actually my first semester and a bit in Portland. And once I did, I realized that I was actually really missing out. And so, that's one of the big things is just to get involved in a good local church that preaches the Bible, that cares about Christian discipleship, loves Jesus. And because that was just as beneficial as my schooling was. So finished my degree, came back here, did an internship with the one and only Andy Steiger.
That's right.
Yep. I learned shameless self-promotion from him.
Dude, that guy's the king of self-promotion, isn't he?
He is. Yep.
He is the king of it.
I saw him in the office with his ghostwriter the other day.
Yes.
For The Human Project.
Nice.
So,
do they have now there's an actor that we have in our general vicinity. Is he in Andy's new film, The Human Project?
Leland Clausen?
Leland Clausen, yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Is he not in it?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I don't think they started filming it yet.
Oh, man.
One day.
Do you think we can get Leland Clausen on this podcast?
I think if people want to have Leland Clausen on the podcast, they should let us know.
Right.
Yeah.
I personally don't think he would contribute anything substantial. I say that as a joke. Leland and I have had an ongoing joking feud.
Oh no.
Which has been heightened in the last few days.
It's been tense.
Oh no.
I don't think he's a listener of the show though, so he won't know this. So that's okay.
He doesn't appreciate the program like John does.
That's right.
So John, you were telling us about Oregon.
Yeah, so finished up in Oregon, came back here, did an internship in the young adults ministry with Andy, and then finished that up. And after a couple of years, was looking for some seminary or where to go. And it was right around the time that Northview was really pushing and developing their Immerse program. And so I had lots of conversations with Kyle Meeker at the time of if this is something I would be interested in when it became available, and just learning more about it. That it just seemed like a really good fit for what I was wanting to do. And also being a longtime Northview attendee and just growing up here, it was a really good fit for both sides actually to develop young leaders in their own church, but also for me to be built into by the leadership here. So it's been a really good year and a bit so far, and I'm looking forward to the next couple of years here.
Fun fact for the listeners, John and I we went to high school together.
That's right.
So that was good.
Yes, it was.
And now we're here serving, and Jonathan Giesbrecht
Yep.
Was also a part of our grad class.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah.
Oh, you guys are
Good
just
stuff.
little friends.
So is actually one of the other pastoral interns, Sean Hildebrandt.
Sean Hildebrandt, one of our other pastoral interns. Yeah.
Wow, dude, what a powerful grad class.
It's,
That's what you get when you go to the Institute.
Is it?
it's
Maybe one thing.
No, it's good.
Yeah, it is.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for being here, John.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
It's always nice to. I always appreciate it when I know I'm someone's last choice.
Yeah.
And that they're desperate, and then you contribute in a meaningful way. So it'll be.
It's really humbling.
It's a comeback season.
Well, everyone else is busy. So here's John.
Here's John. Awesome.
Daniel, it's been I've heard some feedback from some faithful listeners that they're not sure why we're not answering any more questions. What's the deal? Why are you changing the podcast so much? Or is it going to your head?
Greg, I don't know if it's going to my head as much as there's actually kind of a good reason why we haven't been answering some of the questions. Some of them come up and will be answered as sermon series continues. So we have them in our bank and we're waiting to answer them. But in particular, passages such as one's talking about election, for example, there's going to be a lot of that talking in the next few months. And so a lot of the podcast will probably be dominated with that. And
we've also talked about it quite a bit on the podcast.
Oh, John, you are a good former host. Mm-hmm. That really helps. So what John's referring to is actually if you go to the Northview website, on our website, we have under the Northview podcast, there's a list of different media, then podcasts under the Abbotsford campus. So you go there, you'll see something called Extra Archive. And what that is a couple years ago, Greg, right? You tasked a few interns to basically listen to all the different podcasts.
That was up to episode 150, I believe.
Yes,
this was a while ago.
Mm-hmm. It was a while ago. We have to probably redo it, maybe retask some interns. John's super busy. He probably can't do it.
No, I have no time.
I'm pretty busy too. Yeah. I got to host this podcast.
Tied up.
Yeah, I'm pretty tied up. But there was a bunch of interns who went through. They listened to them all, and they actually archived different sections. So if you go to this, and you go to the search bar, and you type in election, every sort of segment that has been about election, it'll be pulled up through the title. And so that's a good way if you want to learn about God's love through the podcast and see what we've said on it previously. You can type that in, and you'll bring up podcast episodes from years back, from years prior, before we even had this studio, and they were sitting in the back of a van.
Well,
I'm kidding. No, they had where they filmed.
They sat in the green room.
Oh, in the green room. Yeah. So that is.
Although the tablecloth is still the same.
It's the same. It's for continuity. I mean, the tablecloth has kind of become part of the podcast.
So can I wrap a bow on that for a second? I think if you are the kind of person who would love to hear what particularly Jeff and Ezra and some of the other pastoral staff would say on particular issues, the first 150 episodes was almost entirely driven by the question, people writing in questions. And so it really is a good resource for you to check that out. Search it. It's searchable. And so it'll be worth your time. And we will still address questions. I think even this episode, we're going to address some questions that people have sent in a while ago. But you also, Daniel, are talking about potentially having different segments of the podcast. to have, some stuff be more just like, let's talk about some of the culture, and some stuff about, let's talk about the sermon, and let's talk. So a little bit of we're going to probably change the flavor of the podcast with some degree of regularity. So,
and hopefully pick things that are applicable to the audience and that actually they would value hearing. Like a while back, we talked about the shooting in Las Vegas. And I think if there's stuff like that, we want to spend time talking about it and processing through that. But other times, a lot of times there's just been, we've already heard this question a lot of times, and it would actually probably be better for you guys to go back and listen to the previous ones, because there's like 7 different takes of some of the issues that are being emailed in. So, if you guys have a question, by all means, email it. But also check the extra podcast archive and see if it hasn't already been addressed before, because that might save you typing an email. And
don't ever be afraid to send us in your thoughts on the podcast and how you think it could get better.
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, speaking. So that was a good segment of housekeeping there, Greg. But speaking of podcasts getting better, we have moved up in the charts. Well, yesterday I checked.
Is this kind of like, now you're kind of addicted to seeing where we are on this list?
Yeah. Daniel's identity is wrapped up in where the podcast is on this top list.
Yeah. So where are we tied up now? My identity's tied up with this podcast.
Where are we at now? We got it. Good reference.
As of last night, we were ranked. Drumroll. We were ranked at 113.
Wow, that's
Greg. Wow. We moved up. We moved into the top 125. And didn't Jeff call it? He said that the Iron Brew segment.
I didn't listen to the last episode.
There. Oh,
I don't subscribe to the podcast.
Oh, weird.
Sorry. Is that?
Anyways,
do you want me to?
Long-time contributor. Yeah, don't listen to
contributor. He lives the podcast. No, but we climbed up in the rankings, in the power rankings, to 113, and then I checked again this morning, and we dropped out of the top 200 podcasts.
Yeah, it's a fickle thing.
It's a fickle game,
and we don't pretend to know how it works. We don't pretend to know the algorithms or the popularity thing. The people at the top, maybe they're feeding money to Apple. We don't know. But this is a free podcast, free of charge. We don't charge. There's no sponsors.
It's true.
Yeah,
you're right. There are no sponsors.
There are no sponsors.
This is charity. We do it because we love it. Because we love this podcast.
It's for the love of the podcast game.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
And trying to make some good podcasting material. Okay, that's great, guys. Thank you for that little segment there and the update. All right. Let's talk about some kind of Christian buzz language that we often use, in the sense that, people get tied up a lot of times when we talk about this particular issue that I'm going to introduce with the idea of election. Okay, so I guess I did bring it up, but this might be helpful. So this is the question. If Christ has successfully rescued his own on the cross, and the knowledge of the elect belongs to God, is it inappropriate to use the term, okay, in quotes, Jesus died for you in evangelism? What do you guys think? We say this all the time. Oh, Jesus died for you. Jesus died for you. Jesus died for you.
Right.
Is it appropriate to use that if we know that God has chosen?
I think short answer, yes. I think it is appropriate to use that kind of language in evangelism, because what we mean by that is that Jesus' death on the cross is sacrificially atoning for your sins, works your forgiveness, and is available for you. Mm-hmm. So we mean that, yes, Jesus did die for you. Mm-hmm. But the application of that is through faith. So, yeah, I think it's entirely appropriate to. I think it's missing the point if you're going to make it an issue to really regulate the kind of language somebody can use in evangelism, because we don't do this in other parts of our faith, right? We don't say I'm a Christian and then follow it up because I'm persevering in the race, right? We don't make that distinction, right?
And when we're encouraging people, we will at times bring up perseverance language, which is good and true and helpful and an important corrective in a society where we don't think perseverance matters for our faith. But we don't always nuance it in that way. Oftentimes when someone's discouraged, we'll say, like, you should keep going because you're secure in the Lord's hands. Mm-hmm. So don't fret, don't worry. We say things like all things will work together for your good. Now, theologically, yes, if you persevere, but often in the midst of the trial, when we just need to be reminded that, no, the Lord will hold me fast and all things will work together for my good. That's a fair thing to say, even though it's not the most theologically precise. I think this is I'm cutting you off, John, but I think
fine.
this is part of the problem with people who, when we become so concerned with theological precision in our language, that sometimes we can become overly pedantic and kind of miss the point. So I think the danger is real to be theologically sloppy. I think the danger is also real to become overly pedantic and feel like we can't say anything and we can't make any sentence or phrase without feeling assured that it's 100% nuanced and clear. And I just think that's a really bad way to go. I think also when it comes to the idea of evangelism and making the call that whosoever will believe can receive this gift, I think it's a legitimate thing for us as people to be making that general call that whosoever believes will be saved. And then the question is how or why do some people respond and other people don't? Well, that's where in theological circles and in the textbooks and in the theological classes, that's when we'll start talking about the order of salvation to make sense of the fact that you could have one brother Bill and brother Bob grow up in the same home with the same parents, the same experiences, the same schools, the same churches, the same everything. And Bill believes in Jesus and Bob does not. Bill continues to believe in Jesus until his death and Bob does not. And so the question, how does it make sense if both nature and nurture is similar in both these cases? Why is it that Bill believes and Bob doesn't? That's where the study of theological proper of, the learning of the order of salvation, that's where those answers can help provide some clarity from the scriptures. But that's a different thing. Studying that kind of a thing and thinking about that kind of a thing is a very different process than saying whosoever believes can come to the Father through Jesus our Lord. We can do both.
Yep.
And we're not being disingenuous or pulling the wool over anyone's eyes. Yep. Make the call broadly and trust that the Spirit will bring the effective call, that the message will be effective in the lives of those that the Spirit changes the hearts of.
Yeah. And I was just thinking too of oftentimes this language of Jesus died for you will happen inside of a conversation. And so there's the ability then to explain that a little bit more too. So I think if you're in a conversation, you sometimes may use broad language, but the goal is to draw people into a conversation so you can explain these terms and these ideas and exactly what the gospel is. And what do you mean by Jesus died for me?
Right. So I think it kind of to summarize that a little bit, I think we should be careful of the way we speak theologically, but we shouldn't be so engrossed in it to the point where we feel like we can't make true statements without feeling like we're being disingenuous. It is not disingenuous to say that whoever wants to believe the gospel can believe the gospel.
Right.
That's a true statement to make. So the answer, the reason behind why someone would want the gospel and why another person wouldn't, that's a different conversation. And that a lot of those conversations don't even divide the whole Calvinist Arminian debate until much later in the conversation. So I think at times we can bring in the Calvinist Arminian debate too soon and too frequently.
Yeah, Greg, that's what I was going to say, because we mentioned this earlier, and that's what you said. This is where the debate is heading. And so I think we can affirm all of these things, and then we can affirm that both Calvinists and Arminians, whatever tribe you land in, they both believe that there are elect. And then they both believe that they have different beliefs on how that election process occurs.
So kind of another kind of summary statement. I think that we can say both Calvinists and Arminians would say that there are people who are going to hear the call that whoever believes will be saved. And they'll both make that call, and they'll both genuinely be able to make that call. And they both will have understandings of why someone would choose to believe and other people wouldn't choose to believe. But what I'm trying to help us think through a little bit is just seeing the areas of agreement between the two viewpoints, which are that they believe God has an elect, and that they believe that those who are elect have chosen to believe the gospel. Mm-hmm. Those are two massive truths held in common. And both of those views could raise the same question this person raises. Is it disingenuous to say whosoever believes? Yep. Because not everyone will believe. Mm-hmm. And I think both responses would say, no, you know what? You can make the general call to believe the gospel, trusting that why or how someone will make a decision or not make a decision to become a Christian is in God's hands. Yep. And we can track down some answers in the scriptures, but ultimately we have to be willing to one, be patient with people because they could come to Christ later in life. Yeah. And two, trust that God is the one who knows who's made that decision and who's going to persevere to the end.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that, guys. That was good. I think you guys well-rounded it. It's one of those things, I think, where it's that kind of Christian paradox, right? Because it's two yeses.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of the fun. It's part of the mystery.
Yep.
Okay, I have another topic I want to bring up here. This is kind of an ethics question for you, John.
Ooh.
And for you, Greg.
Cool.
So here's the question. And it's around the idea, I mean, it's super trendy these days for people to be vegan. Super trendy for people to be vegetarian or gluten-free or whatnot, have certain dietary choices. But for a lot of people, they have to sometimes, just for allergies. Mm-hmm. But another thing, too, is sometimes people have deep convictions about whether it's okay to eat meat or not. Mm-hmm. And what I want to talk about is this idea about, is it okay to eat meat? Is it okay to be vegetarian? Are we being legalists by saying we can or can't? And try and find a balance around that. So here's a question that was sent in. Basically says this: what does the Bible say about the ethics of eating meat, especially with the mistreatment of animals in the food industry? What is the Bible's direction about the health of eating meat? So there's two questions there. One, is it okay for us to eat meat if, the animals are being treated poorly? And two, is it even healthy for us to eat meat? So I guess that's more of a dietary question, but I want to hear what you guys would say. Because, John, you like your meat, don't you?
I do love my meat. I love a good steak.
Oh, yeah.
I know. But yeah, no, I think this is an interesting question. I think you brought up the topic of, are there reasons because of abuses to animals or whatever that you may think this is a better choice or not? And I think sometimes what happens is the abuse of the animals then prompts the response of, well, then we shouldn't do it at all. And I think that goes too far. I think we can all agree that the mistreatment and abuse of animals in the production of food is not a good thing.
Mm. And you're meaning more than just the fact that they're slaughtered. You
right.
I mean,
in the way that
the humane treatment of them prior to their death.
Such as like the feed they have is making them extra heavy so they can fit more meat on the bird or whatever, but it's hard on the bird's joints and they live in constant suffering and torment until they're killed.
Exactly.
Sure.
Those are the kinds of things I mean. I mean, I think there's also humane ways where you can slaughter animals versus inhumane ways. And so we need to consider those things and think through those things and be aware of those things. But just because something is abused does not mean that we need to then respond with, well, then we need to stop all of that. I was, as you were talking, thinking of 1 Timothy 4, Paul's talking to Timothy as he's pastoring in Ephesus. And he's saying, look, you've got false teachers who are coming in and saying, okay, you can't eat this and you can't do this and all of these different things. And his response to Timothy is to say, okay, refute some of these things, but here's what he says in 1 Timothy 4, verse 3, and I'm getting towards the end. These false teachers require abstinence from foods that God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. For everything created by God is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving, for it is made holy by the word of God and prayer. So I think what we're getting here from Paul is a general principle of saying, okay, look, it's not a Christian teaching to require abstinence from certain foods. So to say then, because Christians want to treat God's creation well, that requires then the abstaining from eating of any kind of farmed meat or animal product is to actually miss the point, because God gave us those things to be enjoyed. Mm-hmm. And Paul is saying, look, don't equate those two things. Christianity is not about abstaining from certain foods and enjoying others, or making those things a priority. It's about glorifying God and giving him thanks. Now, you may choose personally to say, look, because of things I've studied, or because of that very issue of the abuses that happen, I'm not going to personally partake in that. Mm-hmm. And that's totally awesome. Mm-hmm. Do it. Great. But those are not requirements for or against being a Christian.
So would it be right for a Christian if you know someone in your group has convictions about meat, mm-hmm. and maybe you guys go out for lunch?
Yep.
And they they're a big vegetarian. They hate how the food industry is slaughtering animals. And it's deeply, they have a deep conviction about that. Does everyone at the table order vegetarian food?
I'm going to say no, partly in response to how that passage, Paul's actually using that passage. He's concerned about people causing other people to go against their conscience and sin. So is me having a burger out for lunch with somebody who's a vegetarian going to cause them to go against their conscience and sin? It might, but based on the conversations that I've had with this person, because I probably know them, I'm going to make not the assumption, but the decision that no, this isn't going to cause them to sin and go against their conscience and eat this meat if that's something they've decided is not okay for them. Mm-hmm. So I think the difference is it going to cause them to sin? Are they going to see me enjoying the freedom that I have and then go against their conscience? Mm. And I don't think in those cases where it's not going to, that's totally fine. Mm.
Yeah, I think in some ways, 1 Corinthians 8 is a helpful framework in terms of the meat sacrificed to idols and that kind of stuff, in that idols were an obviously bad thing mm-hmm. that should not be worshipped.
Yep.
And some people could eat the meat who were sacrificed to those idols, who were given as an act of worship to these false gods. And some people could take that meat and eat it without a break in their conscience. Other people couldn't. Mm-hmm. What we have with the veganism issue isn't exactly a parallel with that. But where it does kind of correlate is the fact that idols are an obviously bad thing, mm-hmm. not the way things should function. Mm-hmm. And inhumane treatment of animals is also I don't think it's going to be a part of the new creation. Right. I think it's something that we should work to avoid and mm-hmm. to fix. And yet you could be eating meat actually sacrificed to this god of capitalism, right? Call it what you want to McDonald's. And for some people, eating that is going to break their conscience, mm-hmm. and they're not going to be able to do it. And that's a Christian liberty for them. And for other people, it's not going to break their conscience, even though both agree things are not the way they ought to when it comes to this issue.
Right.
And some might disagree and they think it's making a big deal out of nothing. But my point is that I think in order for people to I don't think veganism is a Christian issue in terms of it being an ethical issue or a moral issue, that you have to be a vegan to be a legitimate Christian. I think to tend that way, to lean that way, is to lean towards legalism. Mm-hmm. I think likewise, to have someone in your life who is a vegan, it would be improper, I think, for you to force them into participating in eating meat if Absolutely. It's a break of their conscience.
Right.
I think it's a different thing a little bit than what we have in Acts, where Peter doesn't want to eat unclean foods because he doesn't want to defile himself and be seen as a Gentile.
Yep.
And God comes to Peter in a vision in Acts 10 and says, don't call something impure if I've made it
pure.
And so eat the bacon, man. It's not going to make you impure. Mm-hmm. For Peter, that was more about a religious purity issue than it was about how is the bacon processed and what was the life of the pig like before the slaughterhouse. I think so it's not a one-to-one correlation, but it is a helpful framework for us to say that it's not wrong for Christians to engage in eating meat. And it's also not wrong for people to say, I don't want to participate in this. I think another factor in this conversation that I think is worth bringing in is the reality that most of the time we're getting information about things like this from studies or from movies and documentaries, that we just need to be aware of the biases in play. Like, I know the Netflix or documentary, it's probably, you can watch it not on Netflix too, but What the Health is a documentary, and it's basically pushing this whole vegan viewpoint as an ethical necessity,
right?
And better for your body than not. And when you're watching this documentary, it's just obvious that there's no real care being taken to represent the other view fairly. So I think when you're researching these kinds of things, we do need to be aware of who's producing the research, who's producing the report, who's paying for that report to be done. Likely it's a lot more of a complex issue than either side wants to give it credit for.
Yep.
So because of that, I think it's to make a few kind of assertions that everything that God has made should be enjoyed by his creatures in responsible ways. That in the new creation, we will enjoy God's good creation in responsible, sustainable ways. Right now, we live in that already not yet, where we should enjoy things, but we should also be aware that the way that we're doing it may not be the best for fill in the blank, the planet, the economy, the rights of others, all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
Because you could go in all kinds of directions with this. You could also start going down the road. The same people who might be adamantly pro-vegan might also be wearing clothes that were made in a country where the care for the employees were not as high as they rightly should be.
Right.
And for some people, that issue doesn't break their conscience.
Right.
So they'll make the pro-vegan movie while wearing the H&M t-shirt. I don't know if H&M is included in the group of people who are part of this ethical. Sure. I'm just throwing out an example.
Right.
Yeah. So my point is, different people's conscience are going to be pricked and disturbed by different things.
Yep.
And so if every single one of us lived the most sustainable lives possible, we probably wouldn't drive vehicles or own homes or buy food from places that aren't organic, locally sourced. We would probably make all of our own clothing. We would probably have our own farms. Like, I don't see people going all the way on this. And I'm not saying that that's a wrong thing. I'm saying I think that's just a product of people's conscience pricking them in different areas.
Right.
Yeah, Greg, I like what you said about the sustainability thing. I had a professor in university. He was my environmental science professor. And he was saying, all those people that think, all the vegans that think, they're saving the animals' lives because they're eating plants. He says, did you know that when they tear up the fields to plant these, vegan areas, that they're actually you're killing all the tiny little critters that are living there and burrowing there and part of that ecosystem. And so in an attempt to save animals, they end up killing other ones like lower on the chain.
Yeah, but these ones are bigger. Yeah. So it matters.
Yeah. So, but anyways, it was like...
And they talk in Disney movies.
Yeah, I know. Like Bambi. But the idea that sustainability in the fallen world is it possible? Like, we can do our best, but I don't know if it is, because everything we do, there's going to be one side that suffers. And it's interesting, even if if the whole country, I read a study that like if the whole country of Great Britain went vegetarian, it wouldn't be sustainable because they don't have enough land mass. They would have to move land mass into like the rest of Europe, and pretty quickly, the crops won't grow and provide as much food that is needed for the country. So it's an interesting dilemma.
Yeah, it's a complex issue for sure. And I think it's right. I think it's fair for our Christians brothers and sisters to remind us of ways in which the world is broken and ways in which we should try to make things better.
Yeah.
So yes and amen to that. I also think it's fair for Christians to exercise their liberty in areas that others may not feel the same level of freedom. And so I think this is going to be one of those things that we continue to process as a community, as people continue to process these kinds of food issues. It's funny that we're processing food issues 2,000 years ago too.
Right.
Yeah. And how do we handle this in their context? How to do more with explicit idol worship in our context? It has to do more with capitalism and sustainability of ecosystems and of countries and cultures and all that kind of stuff.
And the mass amounts of human beings we have on the earth now.
Yeah. Which, I mean, bringing this a little bit to this past weekend at the Oxford campus, we had IJM this weekend coming up, and Mission, you guys have IJM coming in. This is one of the great things that we should applaud ministries like IJM for, is they're raising the temperature in people's minds about the ways in which our world continues to oppress and marginalize and damage people.
Right.
In a variety of ways, in the sex slaves and in the brick kilns and all kinds of different ways. So kudos to IJM and the work that they do in keeping that kind of thing in the forefront of our minds, because as much as we are people who want to proclaim the gospel clearly and make sure that people are clear that they need reconciliation between them and God, we would be crazy to not also recognize that the New Testament is filled with examples of teaching that how you live that out, that interpersonal reconciliation with God, how you live that out in the horizontal plane with other people, actually says a lot about the legitimacy of the vertical relationship. Yep. And so it's a good reminder for us. And again, there's complex issues too with how to handle that in the best way possible. But
Yep.
Awesome.
Is that it? We're done?
Are we done?
I think we got time for one more. It depends which way you want to go. I mean, Greg, you have you have something coming up Sunday night. Do you want to share a little bit about what's coming up Sunday night?
Oh yeah, sure. It's not really me, but I'm a part of it.
You're
I'm a
in
part
the
of
conference circuit now, Greg.
That's not true. So Sunday night, October 29th, I believe is Sunday night.
Yep.
And at 6:30 in the worship center, we are hosting and participating in a citywide worship service. So different churches from the city of Abbotsford gathering together to do a service. And so I'll be one of the speakers at it. There's going to be other people speaking and leading. Thalia will be involved in praying and hosting and welcoming, and Jonathan Giesbrecht's involved in leading worship at it. So if you're a Northview person, you can come and see a bit of your hometown. Well, we're all from Abbotsford, but a little bit of your own familiar faces. I'll say it that way.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm sure it'll be a very interesting event. I don't actually know what to expect. I haven't been to one of these before, but I'm closing off our service talking about all things to the glory of God. And so as Christian brothers and sisters in the city of Abbotsford, I'm excited to help us think through and live in light of the fact that everything we do is for God's glory. So,
Are you doing a full sermon, or is it more like a sermonette?
They gave me 7 minutes.
Oh, wow. So it's like a TED Talk.
So it's like a half of a TED Talk.
Yeah.
It's like a half TED Talk. You get through your introduction. Well, we're out of time.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be a true devotional in terms of it'll be like the daily bread.
Yep.
Here's a verse. Here's some thoughts.
Let's pray.
Let's pray.
Is this one of those like the 7 minute wink, wink? You can have 17.
I don't think so.
Kind of how some
Pretty sure
pastors.
it's probably not.
I think there's no winking.
No.
Hey, you have a half hour, 54 minutes later.
That's a Kyle Meeker story, right? Do you know that?
Is it?
Is that what you mean?
No, I was pointing more to Ezra Okoti.
Oh, I saw you. I threw Kyle under the bus for no reason.
Yeah.
He
Good
preached
job,
a few
Greg.
years ago. He had 35 minutes and he took 56.
The man's got a lot of information up there.
He's a bright.
Yes,
he's
Kyle is
bright
a
guy.
fantastic.
You got to have
fantastically
outlets to
bright.
be able to get that out, and maybe he didn't have enough outlets at that point, and it all just built up, and he went for it.
He went hard.
Oh man,
He did.
That is good. Well, Greg, we're looking forward to your TED Talk. You know, I've always thought it'd be hilarious to have. I saw someone else do this recently, where they hosted a TED Talk event, and they had like an audience and everything, but the person going up there to give the TED Talk doesn't actually know what the talk is about, and they get the topic as soon as they get up on stage, and they have to talk for like 7 minutes about that particular topic, and they might not even know anything about it, but they have to kind of make their way through it. I think that would be quite a good event. Maybe you could bring that to Northview in the future.
I think if I was put in that position, I would probably just have like a good illustration that I could like tweak to which way I wanted it to go.
Tell a long story.
And just like tell a 4-minute story and then make some points.
Yeah. It's one of those things where you start talking, you have no idea where your sentence is going, and then it's kind of like me most of the time.
Yeah, sounds right.
On this podcast that we love to host and we love being on it. And we hope this was helpful to you. We look forward to hearing from you next week. Until then, take care. And we want to see that podcast hit top 100. Don't we, Greg?
Yeah, that would make my week. That would be that would give me meaning in life.
Sound more excited about that, Greg.
Oh man, Greg, that would make your year. It would make my year. If I saw it at 99, Christmas came early. Thanks for listening.